Yo, this is Destroying Sanity, and if you didn't know, you're watching the best. Alright, so this video might be a little bit long. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm going to try to cut it as much as I can. So we're going to be talking about Dragon Ball Z. Now, Dragon Ball Z is considered by many one of the best animes out there in history. I want to tell you my personal story about me, my experience watching Dragon Ball Z. We're going to go all the way back. Way back. We're going to go back in the early 90s when I was in elementary school. We will wake up, get ready, and then we would just wait until we had to go to school. We would wake up like maybe an hour early and get stuff done and start watching TV or play video games, whatever we were able to do before we had to go to school. And one of the shows that I looked as I flickered the channels was a show called Dragon Ball Z. This was the first time watching Dragon Ball Z, and I was mind blown. I don't know what it was, but I liked the show right away. So I used to watch it every day before I went to school. Now you're probably wondering, how is that freaking possible? Well, you see, I used to watch Dragon Ball Z in the Spanish channel. That's right, I watched Dragon Ball Z in Spanish. That was my first ever Dragon Ball Z, was the Spanish dub. It was not the Ocean dub. I never, and I mean never, watched the Ocean dub in the 90s. Why didn't I watch Ocean dubs in the 90s? I'm gonna tell you why. You see, the Ocean dub will only come on Saturdays. Now, I can't pretty much say this is for every region. I lived in California, Southern California, so this is what we got. Ocean dub anime will come on only at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. One episode per week. I never watched it due to the fact that I only woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. I didn't wake up early. I could not wake up early on Saturdays. I wanted to watch it, in English to see how far they were, but to be honest, I never did get to watch it. So I spend most of my time watching the Spanish one. I watched it from the beginning all the way to the Freezer saga, and I watched it every day on a channel called Telemundo. Telemundo had the Dragon Ball Z in the morning, and that's how I was able to watch Dragon Ball Z in Spanish. And I got to watch it every day. It was the best thing in the world. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. So after that, I think I ended up going to a different school where the time was a bit different. It was a bit different from the other school I went to. So I would not watch Dragon Ball Z anymore. The farthest I got in the Spanish dub when I was young in the 90s was, I think as far as I got was, pretty much the confrontation against Freezer, Vegeta, Krillin, Gohan, etc. And they barely summoned Piccolo from the Dragon Balls. They basically resurrected him. That's as far as I could get. Eventually, I wouldn't watch Dragon Ball Z anymore due to the fact that I couldn't. And then later we went on vacation, and we went down to Mexico, and they were pretty far already. And I did watch some episodes while I was in Mexico, and I got to the part. I got past that part with the resurrection, Piccolo, and all that stuff. And the last part from that in the 90s, that was mid 90s. I think it was, or probably, it was around mid 90s. I think I was in 3rd grade, and 3rd or 4th maybe. And I call it, the last episode I watched from that was Goku barely arriving to planet Namek. That is as far as I got into Dragon Ball Z in the 90s. And then eventually I would have a big gap from not watching Dragon Ball Z anymore. And that's pretty much what happened for a while. So the last time I watched Dragon Ball Z would be probably 95, 96, 97. I don't remember. I know it was in the mid 2000s. I didn't get to watch Dragon Ball Z until the year 99 or 2000. It was one of those years. I was a kid, so I don't really know the dates too much. So I'm just going off by kind of remembering what that year was, or the previous, or the year ahead, what I did. So I pretty much didn't watch Dragon Ball Z for almost many years. I didn't until I came across one of my first ever subbed Dragon Ball Z movies. You see, there was a guy who were helping moving, and his kids liked Dragon Ball Z, and they had these like subbed Dragon Ball Z movies. Literally all the movies you could think of. All the freaking movies, not the Dragon Ball, but just the Dragon Ball Z. You had Wrath of the Dragon. You had the Broly movies. You had BoJack. You had pretty much the Tree of Might. Cooler's Revenge. The Return of Cooler. You had every freaking movie. Subbed, and I got to watch all of them. Now, keep in mind, the last that I watched was Goku arriving at Planet Namek. So, I was already way ahead after that. Because, come on, Dragon Ball Z ended in 96 for Japan. So, these subbed Dragon Ball Z VHS tapes, that's right, they're VHS tapes. This is before internet, so we weren't watching it on the internet. There was internet, but not for that kind of stuff back then. So, these tapes that I watched, I was like really ahead. I saw all the characters, but it was all right in a sense. But also it was kind of like you already knew what happened in the previous seasons in a sense. Because, Cooler's Revenge did show, talk about Goku killing Frieza, obviously. So there was that. And that was the last time I watched that. And I remember bragging a lot about it. People wouldn't believe me, though. I used to brag about it at school, talking about how I watched all these movies and talked about everything that I saw in the movies, and people wouldn't believe me. Internet wasn't that popular back then because having access to a computer wasn't that common compared to what it is now. You could just use your phone to go on the internet. Back then, it was a little bit different. So I remember telling people, and they couldn't believe me and stuff. It was one of those things that you were proud of. Like, yeah, I've watched all this stuff before all of you guys. So we ended up moving, and for the first time ever, we had cable TV. Now, what did cable TV do for us? It gave us Cartoon Network. And Cartoon Network had Toonami. That's right, we had Toonami. That's where they showed shows like Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball Z, you name it, all the stuff that you grew up with. Now, I hated Dragon Ball Z at this point and Toonami. Before you start going crazy, like, I love Toonami. Keep in mind, you might love it, but if you had to sit down and think about it, you're probably gonna say, "Oh yeah, I kind of hated it too." You see, the reason why I didn't like Toonami is that they would show Dragon Ball Z, the whole weekdays. So, but this is what happened. They would show episode 1 through episode whatever episode it was. And then after they got to that episode, let's just say they just arrived at Namek or something, they would rewind it back to episode 1. So the next day you want to watch it, you realize, oh, we're back to episode 1 again. And then they would do that same thing. Let's just say Piccolo was resurrected. Oh, flip it back around. Bam, start from episode 1 again. And they did that for a long while. Dragon Ball Z, I think the last episode that they aired was in 2003. So I spent years constantly rewatching reruns. And at this point, I didn't want to do that after we watched it once. Keep in mind, I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z in the 90s. So I was already caught up all the way till, Goku arrived to Planet Namek. And I had to do it again. And then they wanted me to do it again in Toonami. I was like, no, dude, I ain't doing that. If there's a new episode, I'll watch it. But I am not going to rewatch freaking Dragon Ball Z from episode 1 through whatever episode they want to. And then they flip it around. It got to a point where I couldn't help it. And I was kind of hating Dragon Ball Z at this point. Not because the show sucked or nothing. It was because I didn't want to rewatch all the episodes. I wanted, Dragon Ball Z ended in 96 in Japan. For crying out loud, why did we have to wait so long for it to be, dubbed? So it was to a point where it was just getting frustrating. And then I started watching Yu Yu Hakusho because that was something that I didn't watch in the 90s. So that's why I liked Yu Yu Hakusho a lot during the Toonami days. But we're not talking about Yu Yu Hakusho right now. We're talking about Dragon Ball Z. Eventually, they would release some movies. Keep in mind, I did watch all the movies subbed. So when I watched it, they had this rock and roll music. I didn't like it. I'm not a big fan of the rock and roll music. A lot of Americans will tell you that the movies are better with the rock music because the rock music, it fits Dragon Ball Z, I guess. I don't know. I guess rock music in Dragon Ball Z is a thing for some people. I don't like the rock and roll music. I really, they make it sound like they're emo, dude. They ain't. Dragon Ball Z characters aren't emo. But pretty much there was just a fallout with me and Dragon Ball Z. Eventually, we got to finish it, and I got to finish it. It was great. We got to the Cell Saga. We got to the Boo Saga. We basically pretty much finished it. Once we finished it, it was like over. No more Dragon Ball Z. No more anything anymore. All right, so keep in mind, though Dragon Ball Z was still constantly doing that repeat in Toonami, people that would, have access to the internet, we all eventually found out about GT. GT was so hyped. Everybody, and I mean everybody, wanted to watch GT. People were talking about like, man, I can't wait till we watch GT. Everybody, keep in mind, we didn't have YouTube or videos or whatever. We were just seeing screenshots, and everybody wanted to watch Dragon Ball GT. Little did everyone know, GT sucked. I didn't like GT. Nobody liked GT. That was something that I remember like it was yesterday. I do remember in the 90s, there's a game called Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. That game was so expensive. It was like over $200 for just that game. It was a time where it was like crazy because GT was so hyped. Nobody hyped it. It's just everybody liked Dragon Ball Z that GT was automatically assumed that was going to be the successor of Dragon Ball Z. So that's why everybody loved Dragon Ball GT before it even came out. And once it came out, nobody really liked it. Everyone just hated it. Another thing that I remember a lot growing up in the 2000s is the Dragon Ball Z AF. Now, I did read an article that it was an April Fool's joke pretty much for Dragon Ball Z fans and stuff. But a lot of us didn't know that. Some of us didn't really know that. And a lot of people were talking about AF as well. I remember those cringy Dragon Ball quote-unquote AF characters. It was so easy to just make up stuff and put it on the internet because people were able to believe it. It's kind of like that that one quote people lying. People would actually lie on the internet. Yeah, they would. And that was another thing people were hyped about, was about Dragon Ball AF, but it never existed. It was fake, and it was just that little thing. So in the 2000s and the 90s, Dragon Ball Z was a great, it was a great anime to watch, to see. It was pretty crazy how big it was. What do you guys think? What was your experience? When was the first time you watched Dragon Ball Z? Tell me your experience in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys later. If you guys like this video, make sure to like, subscribe. I'll be making more videos on other animes because I'm going to be talking about a lot of other animes that I watch. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to head out, and I'll see you guys later. And you know what? Peace out.